So, we've been in the afterlife for quite a bit of time now. We have seen and confronted the very creator of the Lich King and the mastermind behind Frostmourne pretty much within his headquarters. Furthermore, we have seen the fate of Arthas in the Afterlife cinematic, yet it is 9.1 and the storyline is almost done, story-wise, and there is still zero signs of Arthas. For such a critical character, not just in the connection between the Shadowlands and Azeroth, but also in the entire Sylvanas storyline, you would expect quite a significant amount of development within the Shadowlands. So, what is going on with Arthas? Is he actually going to show up? And if so, what could he possibly do? Brought to you by Gamivo. Use my link to get Shadowlands in game time cheaper as well as any other game. Use code DORON for an additional discount. The thing about Arthas isn't just that he is possibly the most iconic character of the entire Warcraft series overall, but that he is in fact key in this entire storyline, in this entire Shadowlands ordeal. Sylvanas is, I'd say, the second most important antagonist after the Jailer himself, and as all of you know, it was actually Arthas that raised Sylvanas as a Banshee and that damned her to this fate that she had gotten. Sure, he was under the control of the Jailer, he was just a minion, but I honestly doubt it was the Jailer that made his main mission to resurrect some High Elven general. I'd say that is almost entirely, if not just completely entirely, Arthas' doing. Now, despite not being the first Lich King, that is obviously Ner'zhul, I'd say Arthas is obviously the most important one, and I'm pretty sure most of you can agree with me on this one. Ner'zhul was damned in his position as he tried to escape Kil'jaeden, and pretty much the entire time as a Jailer of the Damned, he just sought a way out, a way to escape this torment. On the other hand, Arthas was deceived as he fell into the trap, but I'd say he was quite a bit more useful for the Jailer overall. The Fallen Prince constantly sought to expand his power, enlarge the influence of the Scourge, and ultimately the Jailer, and it was really him that made the Lich King a superpower in Northrend, even though Ner'zhul kinda laid the ground for that to happen. But obviously, if it was not for Arthas, more than likely Illidan would have destroyed Ner'zhul and the Scourge wouldn't even really be a thing. Now, just before Shadowlands was released, we got the famous Afterlife's Bastion cinematic, where we saw what kind of role Arthas played in Uther's ascent to the Shadowlands and how he pretty much split his soul, and ultimately we found out when Arthas said that only darkness for me, there was not really the Arbiter that sent him into hell because he was a bad guy, he was evil, but instead it was just a vengeful split soul Uther that with the help of the Kyrian flew him atop the maw and just chucked him into the realm, essentially bypassing the mechanism of the afterlife. The reality is, if that didn't occur, he may have escaped ending up in the maw forever, and I'm guessing he would possibly just go to Revendreth, he wouldn't be damned for all eternity. However, aside from that cinematic and Uther's questline where we relived some of his memories, there are actually zero, and I mean zero, signs of him in this expansion thus far. Now, we do have some interesting hints that make some sense, but ultimately it is just speculation. If you follow the Sanctum of Illumination raid in 9.1, you may have realized that Ner'zhul is actually a boss, or well, whatever remains of his soul. Through this, we learn how Zoal essentially sees the Lich King. It is certain that Ner'zhul proved untrustworthy in his master's eyes, and because of that, the Jailer encased him in a cage to torture him for all eternity within the maw. Now, by this logic, and that Arthas was also thrown into maw, you would think that this would be the exact same scenario for him, but honestly I doubt it, because if this was the case, we more than likely would have ran into him by now, as it is 9.1. Sure, the Lich King is a project fail, as the Jailer said it was supposed to set up ground for his coming into Azeroth, and as you know, that didn't exactly happen. It didn't really go according to his master plan. However, Ner'zhul pretty much defied the Jailer the entire time, and he got Arthas to come in and destroy him so that he can escape the frozen throne cage. Realistically, Ner'zhul's main goal was to save himself, and he knew he was a prisoner of Zoal. On the other hand though, Arthas wasn't exactly like this. As I mentioned, he pretty much turned the Lich King into a super villain and a significant power in Northrend, and ultimately he was defeated as he attempted to draw in the greatest champions of Azeroth and to resurrect them into the servants of the Jailer, but he failed in that. In the end, Arthas was a failure, but as far as we know, he never really intended to betray his master and double-cross him. He essentially just faltered as he attempted to gain more power for the Jailer. So while it is possible that Arthas' fate is the same as Ner'zhul's, I doubt he sees him as just a complete failure. However, let's not go to the other side too much as well. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves here. Seeing how Zobal really deals with his minions such as Sylvanas and Denetrius, I honestly doubt he has this sweet spot for Arthas, especially since he's so easily disregarded Denetrius, who is more powerful than any of these characters. Now, as Arthas was not present in the second combination, where is he exactly? Obviously we don't have any concrete information, but here are a few possible scenarios that I can see happening. As it is quite clear that Sylvanas will continue to play a role in the Shadowlands, I think Arthas could possibly get involved because, you know, he is the guy that created her, so we might get a scenario of Maiev and Illidan, just version 2, so the Hunter and the Hunted. On the other hand, and this is honestly a more likely scenario in my opinion, I feel like we might be able to see the good side of Arthas and not really the villain. I honestly doubt we're going to see the Fallen Prince as a servant of the Jailer, but instead someone trying to take vengeance against the one that ruined his kingdom and really forced him to do all this bad stuff. As you might know, Arthas' soul was also split in a way, as he was the very first victim of Frostmourne, so it is entirely possible that the Jailer in his vault also has the soul of Arthas, which we might stumble upon in the future, and we might free him, and ultimately he might have some info that would help us. Info as in knowing what could be the Jailer's weak spot, having worked for him for so long. Possible scenarios I see is that Arthas could help us fight against the Jailer in the ultimate battle, and he might also play a role in the Anduin's storyline. As you might have more than obviously noticed, Anduin is pretty much Arthas 2.0, not just story-wise but even visually, and Arthas may recognize what is going on with Anduin and sacrifice himself to save him from falling down the same path. I think it would really totally make sense. I mean, both were princes of their own kingdoms, around the same age, fighting for their people, blonde hair. However, the one that fell might do something to save the one that still has hope, aka Anduin. So this would be some type of redemption for Arthas, not as in he is now a good guy, he was never bad, but at least he saved another prince from the same thing happening to him. On the other side, I believe another quite realistic scenario is that we might never actually run into Arthas, which might really be a good thing overall. I think playing with Arthas is akin to playing with fire, as he's one of the most iconic characters, and unless they can make a really good storyline with him, it could be quite risky that they could just ruin his character completely. It might just be the fact that Arthas was supposed to be there just as a part of Uther's storyline and redemption, and not really much more than that. Then we might just free his soul as some sort of a side quest as we break the Jailer's vault, and kinda give him at least a bit of peace in the end. Ultimately though, I think this one might actually be the best case scenario for the Fallen Prince of Lordaeron. Thank you for watching. Check out Is the Shadowlands Storyline Actually Bad by clicking on the screen, and also check out Notes Academy for videos on real world history and science. See you next time.